friends, welcome to Toranias. Today we will be discussing daily current affairs of 18th of November 2022. So let's start with the first news of the day. The first news of the day is about the carbon border tax. Now recently we know that G20 summit in Bali is about is about to conclude today. By today evening, Friday evening, it will be concluded. And the basic country, which is Brazil, South Africa, India, China, etc., they have raised uncertainty over this carbon border tax. So we would discuss this what this carbon border tax is. Now basically this was in news because a group of countries has definitely, including India, has opposed this carbon border tax. So the basic countries, they said that this unilateral measures and discriminatory practices such as the carbon border tax, that would result in market distortion and it would aggravate the trust deficit among the parties, and it must be avoided. So let us see what this carbon border tax is. Basically, this is a part of the carbon border adjustment mechanism, a plan from the EU, which is European Union, to tax carbon intensive products such as iron and steel and electricity generation from 2026 onwards. So what does the EU countries has planned? That if they are to import some product which has been manufactured using this carbon intensive industry which emits a lot of carbon dioxide, then they are going to tax that product. That means basically this carbon border tax is an import duty. Basically this is an import duty which will be imposed on the product that are going to be imported in the EU countries by other countries. However, so like I said, that involves imposing import duty on the product manufactured in a country with more lax climate rules, the first point which is to be highlighted, than the one buying it. So business are going to potentially sidestep from this and they are going to benefit from this. Because generally what happens, these MNCs and transnational companies, they establish or they open their factories in the least developed and the developing countries. So the carbon emission will be emitted in the least developed or the developing countries, and the product which are manufactured there would then be imported in the EU countries, right? So this is what the business conglomerates, especially the transnational companies, they do. So there is a theory which is called as a race to the bottom. That means these big conglomerates, they look for the specific locations across the world, especially the African and the sub-Saharan countries, where they can find cheap labor, where they can incur less input cost, and they can sell their product at higher prices. For example, Apple. For example, other American products. So where their product is assembled and manufactured in China because of the cheap labor there. However, their product across the world is sold at higher prices. That is because of their brand value. So this is what is going to happen, and this is a concern with which the basic countries has raised, that it is going to be unfair. Because if we look at the conditions of the developing countries, then they have not contributed enough to the carbon emission. Their industrialization process, or they started to industrialize late in time, when the European countries and the American companies have already industrialized. That means the amount of the carbon which has been already emitted by the EU and the American countries, it is way more than the least developed and the developing countries. And now when the developing countries are rising and their pace of industrialization increasing, the EU countries and the America, that is United States of America, is imposing carbon tax and is trying to vouch for the climate justice and climate change concern. However, according to the basic countries and the other groups such as G77, etc., they have raised that this is not climate justice. We have to have a common but differentiated responsibility, so that all of us, we can contribute to the climate mitigation and adaptation. But carbon border tax is not a fair mechanism. It is unjust to the developing countries who have not contributed to the global warming or global climate change. So the Environment Minister of India, Bhupendra Yadav, he said that in climate action, no sector, no fuel source and no gas should be singled out for action. This is what he had to say. The next news of the day is about the Baliyatra. Prime Minister in the G20 summit had addressed the Indian diaspora, and he mentioned Baliyatra on the sidelines of the summit. The news has been taken from the explained page of the Indian Express. Now, what does this Baliyatra means? Basically, literally, if we translate the Baliyatra, it means the voyage to Bali, and it is one of the country's largest open air fairs, which has recently started in Cuttack, Odisha. Cuttack is in Odisha, right? And Odisha, the name of the ancient name of Odisha is Kalinga. So therefore, the Prime Minister basically tries to describe the relationship between Kalinga, the south, and the Southeast Asian countries. For example, the Cambodia, Java, Sumatra, and Thailand, Myanmar, which was earlier known as Burma, etc., etc. So the Prime Minister has pointed towards the Bali Yatra, which is basically a 2000-year-old maritime and the cultural link between the ancient kingdom of Kalinga, Bali, and that is Indonesia, and other South and Southeast Asian countries. It starts on the Kartik Purnima, that is the full moon day of the Kartik month, which is this month, the month of November, according to the Hindu calendar. So basically, the Bay of Bengal, they had several ports and traders which were earlier known as Sadhavas. So in UPSC prelims previous year questions, if you would notice, the UPSC has this tendency of giving you an ancient name and asking that what does it meant. So Sadhavas, they were basically traders. They were known as traders. Boita means boat. So Boita means boat and Sadhavas means traders. Right. So sometimes questions like these are also asked. For example, from the medieval history also questions would be asked on the basis of the terminologies. For example, there was one question which was asked, what is the meaning of Mukaddam? Mukaddam is basically the village head, right? So this is how the question can be asked. So you should take note of these different terminologies that appear in the newspaper. So Sadhavas are the traders and Boita means to sail. It is related with boats. And the popular items that were traded between the ancient kingdom of Kalinga and the Southeast Asia, they were included pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, silk, camphor and gold. This also could be asked that what were the peculiar or the most famous items that were traded between the two countries. The next news of the day is the Rule of Law Index, which has been recently released by the World Justice Project. World Justice Project is basically an international civil society organization, and it examines the law index on the 4 principles through 8 factors. And what are those 8 factors? The constraints on the government power. Basically if you see that constitution, it limits the power of the government and as well as the parliament. So no parliament and no government can exceed the limit imposed by the Constitution of India. Right. So therefore, the constraints on the government powers, so that the government does not turn into an authoritarian or a totalitarian regime. It is a limited government, and by limited government, in previous year question of UPSC, I think in the year 2020, there was one question which was asked that a constitutional, what do we mean by the government, legitimate government by constitution? That means a limited government. It means the government has a restricted power and the limits are set by the Constitution of India. So there is an absence of government corruption, the second factor. There is an open government. By this means the transparency in the governance and the governing structure. The fourth is the fundamental rights. That means there is no infringement of the fundamental rights of the citizens. The fifth is the order and security. The sixth is the regulatory enforcement. The seventh is the civil justice, and eighth is the criminal justice. Both points towards the criminal justice and the civil justice system of the country. And in India, we have this Indian Penal Code. We have CRPC, which was formed in the year in 1970s. That is Criminal Procedure Code, Indian Penal Code. Then we have Indian Evidence Code, etc., etc. In fact, Indian Evidence Act is a very old act. I think Indian Evidence Act of 1872. It was formed during the British colonial time. So what are the findings of the index? Denmark has of course topped this, and according to the index, India has been ranked 77 out of 140 countries. So in UPSC prelims, which of the following has released this this act or this index or report, etc.? These can be asked. So rule of index has been asked earlier, so it may not be repeated, but similar questions could be asked. The rule of index is released by the World Justice Project. World Justice Project. So this needs to be remembered. And however, one must not need to go into the details of that on which parameter India has scored what point, etc. But however, you should remember that what is the rank of India when it comes to the rule of index report, that is 77 out of 140 countries which were evaluated. The next news of the day is the 19th ASEAN-India Summit. So recently this summit was started on 12th of November, and this was conducted on Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia. So the Vice President led a delegation which took part in the 19th ASEAN-India Summit and in Cambodia. So basically, ASEAN and India, they adopted a joint statement announcing the elevation of their strategic partnership to the comprehensive strategic partnership. And the both sides, they have reaffirmed the importance of maintaining the peace, stability, the safety in the maritime safety and security, freedom of navigation, and the overall fight in the Indo-Pacific region. So basically, this is in accordance with the Sagar vision of the country, of India. So we have this Sagar vision which talks about the security of all in Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean. So the ASEAN India, they have agreed on the cooperation in the space sector. Data reception and processing stations will be established in Vietnam and Indonesia, etc. So now let's see a few important points with respect to the ASEAN. Basically, ASEAN is an international organization of 10 countries of Southeast Asia, and let me show you in the map all those 10 countries which forms part of the ASEAN. So it was in Baliyatra that I had, yeah. So if you look at this map, this is the Southeast Asia map. So we have Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Philippines, right? So these are the countries which form part of the ASEAN. Now let us move on to what ASEAN is and when it was established. So ASEAN, basically it was established on 8th of August 1967 in Thailand. It is headquartered in Jakarta, Indonesia. Now one must remember that recently Indonesia had changed its capital from Jakarta to, so this is your homework. This is the homework, that what is the capital of Indonesia now, because Jakarta is no more the capital of Indonesia. However, ASEAN's headquarters is in Jakarta. The aim of the ASEAN is basically to accelerate the economic growth, the social progress, and the cultural development in the region. It had 10 members, and in the map I showed you the members. There are 5 founding members: the Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And there are other members who later joined ASEAN: the Brunei, Vietnam, Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia. The next news of the day is Shabd Shala initiative. Now this is an initiative of the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminology, which is going to soon launch the Shabd Shala initiative. Now basically it is going to be a website which is going to invite suggestion for the translation of words that have been recently added to the English language, and they are widely used in India. So I think this is a very simple thing that you all have understood, that time to time a language evolves, time to time new words are added to the language. So therefore all the words that have been currently used in India and they have been added to the English language, so the translation of those words are important. So when we translate the works written in English to other the regional language, the local language, etc., or technically speaking the vernacular languages, so there is a requirement of translation of those words also. So Shabd Shala basically is going to invite the suggestions that what could probably the meaning of that word in other languages, etc. So people across, it is an open platform, and people of India can log on to the website, and they can provide the possible suggestions related with the translation of these words in their respective languages. So it is going to be an open platform, and the suggestions will not be limited to the 22 languages which are covered in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, but they can also provide the suggestion in the language such as Bhojpuri, Nagamisa, etc., etc. Selfie, drones, metaverse, artificial intelligence. These are some of the words which have been newly added to the English language, and their translation to other Indian language is not formal. Therefore, it has become of utmost importance that these words need a regional or a local name too. So this initiative will help in finding the standardized vernacular version of these words in common usage. Now let us talk about the Commission for Scientific and Technical Terminologies. Basically, under Article 344 of the Indian Constitution, this was established by the Government of India in the year 1961, and to evolve the technical terminologies in all Indian languages. The aim of this organization is to evolve the technical terminologies, propagate its use, and distribute it widely. It has been established under the Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education, which was renamed from Ministry of Human Resources, MHRD. It is headquartered in New Delhi. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching Tarun IAS. Have a nice day. You can download the PDF from Telegram channel.